It's summer. I'm 14 and I lay floating in the above ground pool my dad had installed a few summers before. I close my eyes and can hear the buzzing sounds of late July and my 5 brothers and sisters splashing, laughing, playing. I imagine myself gently sinking to the bottom of the pool, looking up through the water at the sky and slowly losing consciousness until everything goes black. Things were more than off kilter that summer. My parents had pulled us all out of public school to homeschool us the year before, and the weeks and months seemed to run together. The 6 of us spent most days playing in the woods behind our house, reading stories or dreaming up elaborate fantastical worlds. My 13-year-old brother and I wrangling our younger siblings as best we could. That summer, my grandmother was also quickly dying of cancer. Diagnosed in early spring, by September she would be gone, and my mother, at the age of 36, would have already lost both her parents to untimely deaths. Many days, life seemed like too much for her to handle, and so she would shoo us out the back door to play for hours, while she dealt with her grief in her own way, losing herself in books, and most evenings drinking away the pain. She had already spent months in therapy after her father's sudden death 4 years earlier, working through, as I would later learn, her own childhood trauma. Flash forwards a few months into that fall, I'm now 15. I finally have my own room where I spend hours reading or curled up in a ball on my bed. Most of our time is spent at home in our cabin in the woods with its dark kitchen and continual construction projects, with a weekly trip to town for groceries and a visit to the library. The days seem darker and darker, and I can't shake feelings of hopelessness, like I'm falling into a deep abyss every time I close my eyes. One day, my mom, by this time awake to my behavior and highly concerned, takes me in to see our family physician. Diagnosis: clinical depression. Treatment: Prozac. For a while, it seems like the pills are working. My mother reassures me that they will, as she was prescribed the same medication herself before. I no longer feel such deep, agonizing emotional pain. My parents talk to me about early enrollment at our local community college. I start volunteering at the local library, attending church with a homeschool friend, and take on a part-time babysitting job. It is only several months later, partway into my freshman year of college, that I realized that, in fact, I no longer feel anything. The pills may have taken away my pain, but they've also taken away my joy, my passion, and my intensity, which has always been an essential part of who I am. So I decided to stop taking them. Part of the deal my parents made with me when I enrolled in college at 16 was that for most all intents and purposes, they were going to treat me like an adult and expected me to act like one. And perhaps for many years already they had been. I had my first job babysitting neighbor kids 6 to 8 hours a day the summer I was 12. My brother and I went along to work with our dad on construction sites, at first on Saturdays and in the summer, and later sometimes during the work week, helping install flooring and countertops. And of course, looking out for my brothers and sisters, which meant the choice to stop the antidepressants was on me. And so I started to feel again. I welcomed back the intense emotions, even when extreme anxiety landed me back at the doctor's my sophomore year. It didn't matter because by then I was on my way to discovering who I was and what I wanted from life. Soon I had moved out of my parents' home, studied abroad, met my future spouse, and began to pursue my passions both in and outside of school. It wasn't until 15 years later, after graduating college, moving across the globe, starting my career as an educator, 8 years of marriage, and nearing the end of my Ph.D. research, that my demons came home to roost. My first daughter was born, and my world came crashing to a halt. This is a conversation about motherhood, identity, and how my fear of repeating the past led me to rediscover myself, reconnect to my purpose, and really begin to understand how to parent my children and myself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that while you were writing that, you were saying this I'm loving this format, by the way. So thank you for being courageous enough to write the story. Because I know for myself, as I've been like writing out stories and trying to create those moments, it gets you out of this like go, go, go mentality and actually makes you stop and think. So what was that like for you to like go back and to kind of think about that to prep for this?
It was interesting because I actually, I have all my journals and diaries from the time I was 15. I don't have anything from before that, although I do know I occasionally kept a diary. And I went back through them, and it was kind of a trippy experience because there was a lot of stuff that you just don't remember. I went through a really religious phase in my teens, and I didn't recall being it being that important to me. So it was. But it really helped me to kind of set the tone and get the feel for like what it was for me to be like as a teenager.
Yeah. And it's, as I'm writing, I'm listening to you and I'm writing certain things. And of course I can see myself in you, and we've connected a lot over the last, I want to say year, but you've been in my world for about probably 8-10 months ish.
8 months since June.
Okay.
Since June 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. You were in mastery. And that's what I love, because I really get to know people. And this is selfishly, as we tell these stories, I'm like, no wonder why we get along. No wonder why these people are attracted to me, because I see myself in you when it's like you were always the seeker, right? Like having to grow up really fast, but having this tiny part of you that was like, there has to be more.
Yeah.
You said many things. One was I started to feel again. And before that, you were like, I could no longer feel. It was taking away my joy, my passion, and my intensity. What was that like to feel again?
It was interesting because I remember like when I started taking the medication, the pain was gone. And at first, like, I didn't realize how little I was feeling. It was over a period of time where suddenly I realized, like, while I was no longer in pain, like there were no positive emotions either. And so when I went off, and I didn't go off gradually, I just like quit taking it. And the emotions came back. I mean, it was amazing because I didn't care. Like I was fine having the negative emotions because it meant that I got to have the emotional highs too. I was like, I want to feel good, and I want to feel really good. And I don't want to be limited by, this artificial flat line emotion feeling, the flat aspect. Right. And I said, it was, and like I mentioned, like I actually had to go into the doctor again because I was having symptoms of anxiety attacks my second year in college. And, and the doctor was like trying to figure out what was going on. We told him I'd gone off the medication and that I didn't want to go down that route again. And so it was a matter of finding other strategies, other ways to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And anyone listening, of course, we're not medical professionals. And the whole essence of this conversation is about story. And to take radical responsibility for how you want to feel and lead your life and ask those questions, right? Like be the, what do I say? Like the detective, right? The problem solver. How can I? How did you cope? Like what were some of those early coping strategies versus now as an adult and a mother? And we'll dive deeper into that.
I mean, it's funny because a lot of the stuff that I've ended up repeating once I became a mother were things that I ended up doing. I was in my second year of college. I was working 2 part-time jobs. I was 17 years old. I was also spending a lot of time volunteering for search and rescue. And like one of the things I did was I decided I needed to take something off my plate. So I quit one of my jobs, and that helped relieve the stress a lot. I was exercising, and I think that helped. That was a really good outlet for me at that time. I didn't realize how important it was. but it was something that I found to be really helpful. And journaling as well, which is funny because they're the things you come back to. And that's one of the things that when I was in the program, like, it was like, I feel like I'm finding my way back to myself, to things that I knew at some point in my life and that I just somehow forgotten. I was talking to a friend about it earlier this year. And I said, it was like, I'm in this room that's completely pitch dark. I can't see anything. I know there's a light switch. And I know I knew where the light switch is, and I can't find the freaking light switch until, somebody's like, no, here it is. It's right here. It takes your hand and puts it on it. And you're like, okay. All right. Gotcha.
Even that example, like saying, I knew there was a light switch in the room. That is faith. Like, that is like trust. Like, I know with 100% certainty there is a light switch in this room, right? Also known as, I know I can feel good. I know there's a way back to myself. I just don't know how to get there. And it's that determination to get back to self that I believe makes people successful. Even if it's 1% of your being, it's that determination to get back to self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another part of your story that I found really interesting, and I also identified with, and I wrote down something, is this growing up really fast. You talk about your mother, a lot of grief. You say she was 36 when she lost both of her parents. I am 36, and I just couldn't imagine that right now, even though, I've been through other things. That would be a lot. And then to do it, with your children, by yourself. No, your parents were together?
Yes, my parents are together. Still.
Okay. So to do it, just to process a lot of that and not be able to feel like you can catch your breath. So you take on that role. We do what we need to do, right? We're like, I got this. It's not funny, but this is what I hear culturally is you're so responsible. Like, it's praised upon to be mature, right? Like, mature. You're like, no, I'm an adult in a child's body, and I'm acting as if. But I will tell you, part of my personal issue as my children have grown, and I'm raising 3 boys, so I have no girls, which I feel like the personality is very different. Part of what my children have triggered me over the years is me calling them lazy in my mind, especially as they're getting older, when I'm like, Heather, who you needed to be at their age was not appropriate. And the fact that you want them to grow up quicker is me projecting my trauma onto them and not actually knowing what is developmentally appropriate. That has been a big one. Yeah,
I find that happening with my daughters. I only have girls. So I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old right now. And I have to catch myself and stop myself because my expectations for them is like, when I was 7 years old, I already had 3 younger siblings, and my mom was pregnant with the 5th. So sorry. And I was, just like you, I was expected to grow up really fast. I remember having a conversation with my parents when I was 13 that my mother said that she wasn't going to punish me anymore, that she expected me to be responsible for my actions and to act like an adult. And that really marked me because at that point, she said, you know what, she said, I'm not going to discipline you anymore. You need to be in charge of handling yourself.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I knew that there were rules and that I had to follow them, and that I was also expected to enforce them for everybody else. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and what I can hear, and this is where I go back to, whether we have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, the strength of the women that came before us, because all day long, anyone listening to this, myself included, we can look at that lineage and blame. Everyone talks about the mother wound, regardless of who you are or what your mother was like. It's such a deep, impactful relationship that it doesn't matter how quote unquote perfect you are, how much work you do on yourself. There's always going to be some human, spiritual, impactful wound that, goes down through the lineage. And I look at my lineage and I think about, holy crap, look at what you've been through and look at what you accomplished. It's, yes, there, for me, knowing that I didn't want my children to feel the way that I felt as a child, that was a motivator for me to undo. But I also realized the other side of that is I wouldn't be who I am today without that. So I'm curious your relationship with that, like I had to grow up quick versus who you've become today.
It's this summer, I actually wrote a lot of letters to my inner child. Right when I was starting with mastery, I was also listening to some other podcasts and doing some reading of a lot of books, a lot of reading in the last couple of years on this sort of topic. And like, I realized that, I needed to have these conversations with that little girl who stopped being a little girl way too soon and find out what she needed. And one of the things that I did as well was write a letter, and kind of rewrite the story of my childhood. And I did one from the perspective of a victim and another one from the perspective of empowerment, where I thanked myself for all of the things that I had learned from that role I had played in my family. And I completely agree with you, Heather, on the fact that if we had not been through those experiences, we would not be who we are today. And that many of the things that, that we do or we did and dealt with as children really shape our paths as adults and the types of relationships that we have and the types of careers we choose and the way we show up in different relationships. And it really took, for me, becoming a mother to understand my own childhood.
Ooh, say that again.
It really took becoming a mother for me to understand my own childhood. I had this perspective, in my own mind, I had a pretty good childhood. And in many ways, I did have a really amazing childhood. There was lots of things that I would not change about my life growing up. But there were many things that I was not completely conscious of because, when you're 6, 8, 10, 14, you're not really aware of everything that's going on, right? And you don't see it with the same perspective, especially when you haven't been a parent. And now as a parent, I look back and see different things that happened and I'm like, oh. And then just the conversations I've had with my siblings. And that's been a real eye opener because my perspective as the oldest of what our childhood was is not the same as my siblings. There's 6 of us and I'm separated in age by 11 years from my youngest brother.
Wow.
And particularly with the youngest 2, because one of my sisters also lives near me now, and we have a lot of conversations. The rest are back in the States. And she's like, some of the time you were our mom. And I didn't feel I just felt like I was the big sister. And talking with my mom in her childhood, something similar happened. She's also the oldest of 6 kids. Mm-hmm. And some of the times my mom was kind of the mom for her siblings. And after her own mother died when she was 36, she kind of turned into the mother figure again for her siblings.
Wow. Yeah. And that's exhausting. I want to talk about the teen part of you. Mm-hmm. I can so identify feeling out of control emotionally, right? Having these intense feelings. And what do we do? I always say children are vulnerable because they don't have control, right? And then you grow into, I'm experiencing this now, you're growing into with my oldest, child becoming an adult and not having control over everything, finances, the food in the fridge, for the most part. It's just, I have control over what color I want my walls, which again, he could. But my point is, you don't have control over everything. Everything I'm saying, I'm like, well, technically they could have control over that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When it's so difficult to communicate what's going on the inside, and developing this trust with these role models or mentors around us, and I'm using air quotes, these adults around us that are supposed to be guiding us. And we're like, not this, not this, not this. We're developing those coping strategies, which maybe for me, it was sleeping. I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. I don't know why. It just wasn't my thing. It was many other things, not staying home, trying to be around friends and things like that. Going back to that, like, what would you say to your younger self now from that version?
Well, I'm thinking about the coping strategy thing because I didn't realize that I was copying patterns until much later. And for up until very recently, one of my major coping patterns was reading. And you asked me about that earlier, and I didn't pick up on that part of it. And so whenever things would get too intense, the way I would check out would be by reading fiction. And it's something my mother did my entire childhood. And, I thought, it's just, I love to read. And it wasn't until I gained a lot more self-awareness that I realized that I wasn't reading so much, because during my teen years, before I started college, there would be weeks where all I would do would read. I would read 1-2 books a day. I would go for week, and then I'd come out and be involved with everybody around me and go back in. And it was a way to escape from the way I was feeling and not knowing how to cope.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if I could go back and talk to my teen self, like, I think the first thing I would tell her is say, you know what, your intuition is right. The world is not limited to this house and this family and this way of being. My passion from very early on was other cultures. And I was really clear on the fact that I really wanted to travel and see other cultures and learn other languages. And I think it was in part that little that little voice in my head saying, there's more, there's something else, this isn't the only way to do things, and wanting more. Right.
Yeah. I don't personally resonate with the reading aspect of it, because that was never my go-to, but I remember, my middle one loves to read, and I can tell when his anxiety is getting worse because he reads more, and you can see it as a place, like a form of hiding. So I witnessed that as a parent, as a symptom, and then I intervene. And he typically does not have the self-awareness yet, or he does, but he doesn't know how to communicate how he's feeling. And so it goes back, as an adult, I always say children's behavior is a language that, we're asking people, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? It's sometimes we don't have the language to be able to communicate. And if you don't have the language as an adult to be able to communicate what is going on inside of you, there is no way a child, especially a child that lives with you or is around you, is going to know how to communicate if they've never been taught. It's a skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say has been the biggest shift for you in the last 8 months-ish around your growth? Like, what's been the one thing you've learned and discovered about yourself?
One thing, just one thing, Heather?
We'll talk about how it's manifesting in your life and, changing your relationships. But I'm curious, if you had to walk away, you're like, wow, that was surprising.
I'm trying to hone in on one thing, like, that has changed in my relationship with myself or in my behavior.
Just whatever's coming up for you. And maybe it's multiple things. What have you noticed?
I've noticed a lot more awareness in general. The huge realization, because I originally started doing this work because I wanted to step into a new leadership role in my career. And I knew that where I was at emotionally, I was not going to be able to handle all the sort of shit that I was going to have to deal with in a higher level of Yes, exactly.
More shit.
Yes. I like right now I run a small public adult education center, and I want to move into a district supervisor role. And district supervisors are who all of the directors or the principals go to with their problems. And when I started considering it, I was an emotional wreck. Like I was all the way up there on all the coping strategies, and including basically borderline alcoholism, 75 pounds overweight, and just like this was 2-3 years ago. And so I started this journey saying, okay, you got to get your stuff together. And my first step was to lose the weight, because I'm like, well, if you can lose the weight, then maybe you can start to deal with your emotions. Right? Because I knew I was emotionally eating. And so like that awareness came first. But it was once I got in the program, and I knew that I was in the program because I wanted to up-level my career. It was a couple months later that I realized that what really needed to happen was that conversation with my inner child. And that like at the root of everything was this huge fear that I was going to repeat the emotional disconnection that I felt with my mother, with my children.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to interrupt today's podcast to talk about our sponsor, Athletic Greens. I started using AG1 about a month ago after they reached out to me, and I thought, let's give it a try. I got rid of coffee. I am like 30 days in with no coffee. I have been on this kick for a really, really long time. And I will tell you, you don't necessarily need to kick coffee in order to incorporate AG1 into your daily routine. What I'm saying is it's life enhancing. And for me, it has been a game changer for my gut, my energy, and how I feel mentally. With 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole foods sourced, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It does all the things. So what I typically do is in the morning, I wake up and I have my gallon of water waiting for me. Yes, I drink almost a gallon every single day. That's my goal. And I pour my first liter into my mason jar, and I add a scoop of my Athletic Greens even before I eat, and I chug it. And sometimes I even put it in the boys' smoothies, and they have no idea. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover, and it cost him over $100 a day. That's ridiculous, and I've totally been there. So he created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on his own. It's cheaper than getting all the different supplements for yourself, and you can make it like a micro habit and part of your daily lifestyle. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply, immune boosting vitamin D, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/EU. EU for emotionally uncomfortable. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/EU. Athletic Greens, AthleticGreens. athleticgreens.com/EU to take ownership over your health. Pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, now back to our interview. I think it's so fascinating. And this is why I always tell people, like, what's that next level for you? Like, what's that thing that you want or desire? And sometimes, like for you, it was, I want a promotion or I want a new position. And that's the thing you want to grab, right? So for some, it's they can't even see that. They're like, it's just this fear that I'm going to screw up my kids, or it's this other relationship that's breaking down, or you're like, I need to work on my physical health because I can feel it. Like I think we've all probably had that feeling in some point of like, I'm crawling in my skin. Like this big sack of whatever you're in.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the thing that we want to fix. And I always tell people, what you think you need and what you actually need are two different things. And if you see your emotional well-being almost like surgery or a surgeon going in there and saying, we see your symptoms, we know there's a bulge, or, we know you're having these symptoms, but I actually won't really know what's going on until we get in there, until we see it. And that's what this process is about. You're like, here it is. Let's lose the physical weight. Now let's lose the emotional weight.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that promotion now, that next level?
It's interesting because I put so much value on it when I first started thinking about it, and I made it into a much bigger deal than I think it really is. And the exams are coming up pretty soon. I know that on some levels I am prepared for it. At other levels, I'm still radically underprepared because I don't have the actual experience in the role. Mm-hmm. But I'm okay with it. Like, I've kind of let go of the attachment to the end result, because I feel like what I'm learning and who I'm becoming on the way is a lot more important than the promotion itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting, those cliche things we hear about. It's the journey, it's not the destination. And I know you and I we kind of met through macros, macro nutrition. For people who don't know what that is, you can Google it. The food world and habits and identity. And when you were telling your story, you said this is a conversation about identity. And I think we connect there too, because we're so obsessed with goals. We're so, like, as a culture, so obsessed with getting that thing. And that's okay. Whether we think that, like I always say, new level, new devil, you can have those material things. You can have that, whatever, like, give yourself permission to want that. But it is about the identity piece and who you become on the way there. So can you just talk a little bit about your perspective of identity and habits? Because I find this fascinating, and I know we both connect there.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to backtrack a little bit with that.
And geek out too. I know you have the science brain, so go for it.
Okay, so backtrack a little bit. For me, one of the big things that keyed this whole journey was the identity shift that happens when you become a mother. And I felt like I stopped existing for several months after giving birth. I did not know who I was anymore. A lot of things that I believed about myself were radically tested. And going back to work was also, I really wanted to go back to work because I knew who I was there. And it's funny now, is like one of my comfort areas is being in the classroom, because I'm completely in control there and I know what's going on. And so it's kind of like my new drug, but
I know it's like that like, it's healthy, but it's comfort. Like when you have that self-awareness, you're like, oh
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but yeah, on the idea of identity is like, it's back to the dark room metaphor. Is like, I didn't know who I was, and I needed to find a way to come back to who I was. And I knew that the weight, because most of the weight I had put on, like during my pregnancies and after, while writing my Ph.D. thesis, which is a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to get into. That would give for an entire podcast by itself. But I realized like the weight I was hiding behind the weight in many ways, and it was protecting me from becoming the person who I knew I could be and that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And with the whole idea of building a new identity, it's not something that happens overnight, right? And it's something that you have to create in your mind first. You can't just become that person without envisioning and having an idea of what you want to be and who you want to be and why you want to be that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the habits part is the part I've actually really struggled with that, because
that is not from my perspective. I think I'm just as an outsider, I'm just cutting you off there for a second.
Okay.
One, there was something that you just said about, adding this extra weight. And I know people listening are really going to be able to identify this is a form of hiding, which is so interesting because people can still see us, but yet we feel like they can't see us and we're hiding, but we're probably more visible. I mean, people noticed anything when you change your body, which is so annoying, which was part of my fear of actually releasing weight from my body because of the comments people make when I was like, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. And it's that cultural expectation. But it's just so weird to me that we think, when you think about it, when we're like, I was a form of hiding, but it's like your soul is hiding in this meat suit. But in reality, people can still see you. Like you're not physically hiding unless you're like under a rock somewhere. The habit formation is intriguing because watching you are somebody that is, to me, consistent, determined, and that problem solver brain, but it wasn't emotionally comfortable for you because it really challenged you.
Yes. I'm used to, in certain areas of my life, getting results without having consistent habits in certain areas of my life. And so the idea of having to do something over and over again was really challenging for me. However, our brain, the way it works is like our brain has these circuits. And when you're used to doing something one way, it's really hard for you to do something another way. And the only way to create that new identity is to consistently do things differently. I've been thinking a lot recently about the concept of closed systems and entropy, and how we as humans, and especially the way our brain works, can become a closed system. Mm-hmm. And a closed system, if you don't inject any more energy into it, will tend toward entropy, which is basically chaos, right? Explain. So if you have a closed system in nature, if you don't inject more energy into that system, things will just go downhill. Instead of continuing the way they should, it needs more energy. And if you want to up-level that system, the only way to improve it is to inject more energy and to do things differently. Okay? And so with the way that we create habits, you're doing something that you've always done, and your brain is really attached to the way you've done things and to your habits, your systems, your routines, who you are. And the brain it's evolved, it's been designed to keep us alive, right? And so when you do something different, your brain freaks out because it says, oh my God, you're going to die. Like it doesn't know the difference between when you get stressed out, your brain can't tell the difference between if you are being chased by a bear or if you have to give a presentation. It experiences the stress the same way. And so the stress of creating a new identity is the same way. And it also comes down to like, we live in communities, and that fear of if I change and if I do things differently from the other members of my community, will I still be accepted, or will they kick me out of the tribe and leave me to starve and die?
Yeah.
Again, our primitive parts of our brain don't understand the difference between people making negative comments about your life choices and, living in a cave 20,000 years ago.
This is so fascinating. Sorry to cut you off. Because I feel this on the daily around the annoyance. That's like I always go back to like diet culture, but I see it in the personal development world too, where people invest in something for 2-3 months, even 8 months. Right. And that's why my programs are typically longer. And sometimes if people do have a shorter sprint, I'm like, listen, this short sprint, the whole purpose of it is literally to get your brain to give you a win, to buy into the fact that change is possible. It is not here to sell you on overnight success. It's here to get your brain to be like, okay, if I did that, I just need to do it again and again and again. But I see how people sabotage their success all the time. Like, you can feel really good right now, but are you going to be okay if you're out of this container of space? And they're like, not yet, because their identity hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. And I see myself on a daily basis, even especially like when I'm working out or going for that walk or making another meal. I actually saw a video. Now I'm like shifting. I saw a video with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Did I say his last name is so complicated? And someone was like, why do you still work out? I don't even know how old he is. Everyone has mixed feelings about him. But the whole point is, he's like, that's such a dumb question. What? He's like, why aren't you asking me, like, why do you still sleep? Why do you still eat? And he's like, it's my identity. He's like, I will work out until the day I die. He's like, I slept yesterday. I slept last year. I slept 10 years ago. I ate yesterday. I drank my water yesterday. Why are you not, like, the question was so, he's like, why are you asking me this really stupid question? Because it's in his DNA.
It's part of who he is.
Yeah.
And that's why the part, like, changing your identity, the key thing, one of the things that's really hit home over and over again throughout this process, throughout my transformation with my health and my eating patterns and stopping emotionally eating, and then with the personal development part, has been like recognizing the role that discomfort plays in habit formation and creating a new identity. Because if you can stick to a habit when you're feeling amazing, good, kudos, you get your gold star, right? But the real question is that habit part of your identity? Is if you still do it when it feels uncomfortable and you don't want to. I had like this really, really stupid moment of epiphany a couple months ago where I was getting ready for bed. And I thought to myself, I was really tired, December, short days, everybody's tired. It's winter. I'm like, oh, I don't feel like it. I'm not going to wash my face and put on my face cream. Like I said, really stupid example, right? And like, it doesn't matter. It's just one day. And I thought to myself, and I just like a light bulb went on in my head. And I'm like, no, today is the day when you need to do that most, because when you feel the least like doing it, that's when you create the habit. When it's the most uncomfortable, when you feel the least like doing it, when it's the most painful, that's when you know that you are overriding those old neural circuits and you are forming a new pattern of behavior and you are reaffirming your identity to yourself, because that's who it matters to, not anyone else.
So you say it's stupid. I say it's practical and magical, because that's what I call the brave zone, right? Or whatever the heck you want to call it. Everyone creates labels for everything. You are entering that emotional discomfort moment. And in that moment, for me, it has nothing to do with washing your face, right? So when I'm there in certain areas of my life, one, you were able to identify the story that you were telling yourself, and you stopped giving it so much power. You were like, that is not in alignment. Therefore, I'm going to change my action. My action is going to take less than 5 minutes, wash my face, put face cream on. I know you probably didn't really care about that, but you were like, this is much bigger, right? The bigger vision is I want to change my identity. Therefore, I'm stopping myself here. And that's why I tell people I do things all the time that make me emotionally uncomfortable that sometimes has no connection to my personal or professional life. And they're like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because if I can develop the skill here, this is going to directly translate into other areas of my life. And sometimes that's how I get myself to work out or go for a walk. I'm like, this is a parenting strategy right now, because that's a big part of my why. Or this is an impact strategy. How is going for a walk going to help me make a bigger impact in the world? There's many ways we can talk about that, right? So yeah, you rise above, and that's self-coaching. It doesn't matter how much you invest in the latest and greatest. In that moment, if you choose the same pattern, you will always get the same result.
Yes. And it's funny. I see it happening over and over again in my life. And that's like the one thing I've noticed, especially in the last couple of months, is I'm getting so much better at seeing these moments and being like, that's it. And one of my big things is thinking I don't have enough time. I think a lot of people can resonate with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll be doing something which I'm like, want to rush through and not do the way I know I need to do it. And I ask myself, well, what's the story here? The story is, I don't have enough time to do X, Y, Z. I don't have enough time to put the dishes in the dishwasher. And I ask myself, is that really true? Or is it just that you're telling yourself that because you don't want to have to deal with the emotional discomfort of X, Y, Z, right?
You've drank my Kool-Aid, Isadora. Okay. I could talk to you forever and ever. And as I know, you know this, evolution, right? Like you constantly evolve as a person and the work never stops. And to go back to yourself, that younger self in the story, how do you want to be remembered? What's the impact you want to make? How do you want your girls to remember you when your life cycle is complete?
That's a really good question. I would want them to remember me as being present. I want them to remember me as being someone who had principles and stood by them for myself and for others. I work in the education sector, and I think it's really important to model, the sort of things that we want to see in the world. And with my daughters, like I want them to be able to see me as someone who, that their well-being is important to me, but that everybody's well-being is important to me. And for that to happen, like my well-being also has to be important to me. And I think just like to be able to parent from a position of strength instead of from a position of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we all make mistakes. I know that we're all doing the best we can too. And I'm sure that my daughters, if they someday are parents as well, there will be things that they look back on from their own childhood and say, maybe I'm going to do this differently. But that they are able to say, my mother was there. She was there physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And that, she was connected to us and she knew what we needed and did her best to help us become who we needed to become, right?
Awesome. And to take this conversation one level deeper, you're like, oh shit, where is she going? You are in Spain right now.
Yes.
And when we started this conversation, I asked you what the current cultural conversation is, or the energy. And one of the biggest questions I receive from people is, how do I not let the energy of the world affect me? And when there is chaos going on around you, like how are you showing up during this time, knowing that there is a disruption. A lot of people are suffering, and your country is literally bringing people in.
I like to focus on what's within my control. I know that the news cycle is highly addictive. It's designed to be addictive. I generally don't tend to pay too much attention to the news for that reason, but sometimes you do have to be a little bit attuned to what's going on. But I always come back to the dichotomy of control, like what is within my control and what is outside my control. And within my control is the ability to help within my own community, the ability to teach my daughters about what it means to be a helper and to have solidarity with other people. At my daughter's school, actually, they're doing a drive for donations, and it's really amazing to see how the community is coming together and people are donating all sorts of stuff: food, clothes, toys. But yeah, for me, like when I notice that the energy is that way, and you pick up on it because people are nervous, people are worried, there's all sorts of things going on. And I know that, like, if I can control my own energy, because that is within my control, and I can show up how I want to show up emotionally and be stable and open and accepting and be able to show other people how you can regulate your own emotions, it's going to help so much more than if I get dragged into that negative spiral, right?
Yeah. And this clearly has no correlation. And it goes back to the face wash and the cream, that in those moments when you don't want to do the work, I'm witnessing, just observing you, is how you lead differently. And in these moments, people will turn to you because your energy is grounded. And even though uncertainty can still be there and there can be so much chaos going around, and you can be vulnerable, right? You're like, this is fucked. Like, this is not good. I'm not happy right now. I'm not like, woohoo, yay. But I'm going to keep up with my habits. I'm going to keep doing the work. And on the days I don't want to, I'm going to, because there's a bigger purpose here. And you get to lead, right? You lead and you influence those around you, whether it's your students or colleagues or neighbors or somebody walking down the street, or people who need that. That's the steadiness that people crave, which is to be safe.
And that's one of the transformations I've seen with this whole process, because, full circle, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of when all the lockdowns happened. And I am a radically different person from when that happened. I remember going into a tailspin. We received the news less than 24 hours before everything closed down here that we were going to be going completely online with our schools. And I did not handle it very well because I really did not know what to do. And I didn't have the tools. Like, I didn't have the emotional space to handle it. And there have been so many things that have happened this year. And every time something like that happens, like, I take a moment to sit back and acknowledge how far I've come. And I think that's really important too, when you are on a personal development process, when you are trying to up level and become a different version of yourself, is to take that time to reflect and thank yourself for doing the work. And say, okay, today was really hard. This crap was horrible, but you showed up, you came through, like, you went home and you got on your exercise bike. You didn't drink a bottle of wine. You didn't yell at anybody. And, you were the person that you needed to be. And it was really fucking hard, but you did it.
Yeah. Thank you. Isadora, where can people find you? I know they're going to be inspired by this conversation. So what are you up to, and where can they connect with you if they want to personally reach out?
Okay. I'm currently working on preparing for an exam that I have coming up for internal promotion to become a district supervisor here in the region where I live in Spain. I'm also doing 75 hard.
Fun. What day are you on?
I am on day 63. Yes. I am almost done. Yeah, I can't believe that I'm on day 63. So I'm getting really excited. So yeah, I'm almost done with that.
That's amazing.
And other than that, right now, those are pretty much the two main things I'm working on. And you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is isadora.b.norman. Okay.
So Isadora, Isadora.
Yes.
.b, like the letter B.
Yes.
And Norman, how do you spell that?
Norman.
Perfect. Isadora, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to watch you grow, to lead you. I truly believe that you are making an amazing impact in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
There it is. You just listened to the Emotionally Uncomfortable podcast. If you want to take this conversation to the next level, head on over to our private Facebook group community, heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. My last name is spelled CHAUVIN. That's heatherchauvin.com/Facebook. Also, if you are a huge fan of the show, please rate and review it on iTunes. Every review helps another woman like you take back control of how she wants to feel and become emotionally uncomfortable. I truly